Hello, I'm Dr. Brandt Gibson, and I'm so excited to be with you today. How many of you have actually looked at how thermostats work? How many of you have ever looked at them specifically and say, okay, I'm basically setting the thermostat to a certain temperature, and depending if it's on hot or cold, it's going to adjust up or adjust down to maintain that temperature. And the idea is no matter what you do. So if you say, okay, I'm going to set the thermostat at a certain temperature in the middle of the winter, and I want it to maintain that temperature, and then it's going to work really hard to get it up to that temperature. There's things you can do to interfere with that. If you were to leave all the windows and doors open of your house, even with the thermostat running, you're gonna have a hard time maintaining that temperature. Same thing in the middle of summer. If you're saying, okay, I'm going to set my thermostat at a certain temperature and then run my external heaters and fireplace, all that kind of stuff, it's gonna have a hard time maintaining that temperature because everything around it is actually interfering. What I wanna do is take that thermostat and explain it as a comparison you can use for self-esteem. Most of us set our self-esteem set point. We actually basically have a point of what we think our worth is, our self-worth is. And we're setting that point, and no matter what we do, we're gonna have a hard time getting above it or getting below it because it's coming back to that point. The external influences will aggressively change the way that thermostat's going to work. That self-esteem set point's going to work in your life. There is a portion of the brain, the reticular activating system, the RAS filter, that actually will look for and find what it's being told. This is a way that the unconscious mind actually adjusts for the millions of inputs that are coming in and helps you only see what you're looking for. Otherwise, your conscious mind would be overwhelmed with too much information. It would be almost impossible to function and do normal activities because you'd just be interrupted on a regular basis. So because of this RAS filter, it's going to actually find those things you're looking for. Say, okay, I want to buy a black Ram 2500 pickup. Then is when you go outside and you start driving around, you start noticing all the people, all the neighbors that have the black Ram 2500 pickups that you didn't notice until you were going to get one. And that's the RAS filter turning off that filter and saying, okay, you can now see the black Ram pickups. But I guess an even better example is when a lady becomes pregnant, she starts to notice all the individuals and all the products and everything that has to do with pregnancy. That's just the way it works. Your RAS filter is turned off. It says, okay, this is now something I'm supposed to notice. So because of that, we can aggressively self-sabotage if we're not careful when it comes to self-esteem, come to self-worth. We start to consider ourselves at a certain level, and we're unable to get above it. We're unable to do anything but stay right at that point because of our RAS filter that's going to reinforce that we're not worth it, for example. So if you say, okay, I'm just not smart enough to do that, then as you're working on it, as you're studying it, as you're trying to figure it out, you're going to continually get the inputs and notice the inputs that prove that you're right, that you're just not smart enough to do that. If you say you want to write a book and you say, okay, I just don't think I'm going to ever complete it, then you will start noticing all the things that are going to prove you right. So what you need to do is you need to physically say, okay, I'm going to change that set point and I'm going to turn it up. I want to turn that thermostat up to the point where I am extraordinary. I am an individual that is unique, an individual that can do things that nobody else can do, an individual that can change the world just by being me. And that is absolutely true. You were born extraordinary. There is nobody just like you. And there are things that you can do that nobody else can. That's your thermostat. that's your set point, and that's really what it comes down to. So I'm going to tell you a quick story, and I'm going to shorten it because you've all heard this story before, but to kind of finish this up with a point to make sure that you realize what we're saying here. So all of you have heard the story of the ugly duckling. And in this story, you've got a mother that's really, really excited for her eggs to hatch. And she has a few more than she usually has. And as she's hatching these eggs, several of them hatch, and they're beautiful little ducklings. And she's really, really excited. But there's one egg that's just taking a little bit longer. And she continues to sit on that egg waiting for it to hatch. All of a sudden, it starts to hatch, and out comes this white, ugly duckling. It's a little bit bigger than the other ducks. It's not as pretty. Doesn't have the orange feathers. It's just not what everybody's looking for. And the idea here is they're just struggling basically to say, okay, this is my child, yes, but there's just something wrong here. And the little duckling actually realized that these other ducks were starting to treat it differently, realized that the mom was actually treating him a little bit differently, and he was considered the ugly one of the family. And this continued to go on over and over and over again as the ducks were growing, and this ugly duckling just wasn't getting prettier. And it got to the point where the ugly duckling felt like it was a problem, that it shouldn't make his mother deal with him anymore, so he ran away. And as he ran away, there's multiple things that happen in the story here that I'm not going to focus on, but there came a point the next spring that this ugly duckling looked up in the air and saw this beautiful, beautiful swans that were flying, and looked up and couldn't believe how pretty they were. And as he was walking over to the water to find some food, he looked down and noticed that there was a swan, a beautiful swan, looking back at him. So initially, at the early parts of the ugly duckling's life, his self-esteem set point was set very low because he wasn't like everybody else. He wasn't as pretty, didn't have the same feathers, he didn't quack, he actually honked. And the idea was this was his thermostat, this was his set point, and he didn't feel good about himself because of all these things. And he was noticing all the differences, noticing all the problems, noticing that he didn't look like any of the other ducks. What he didn't realize is he looked perfectly well like all the other swans. And as he grew older and started to notice the swans and realized that he actually was a swan, not a duck, his self-esteem set point went higher. He was a much prettier bird than many of the ducks because he was a beautiful swan. You are extraordinary. You are a beautiful swan in your own life. And stop letting the world tell you that you're the ugly duckling. I'm Dr. Brandt Gibson, and remember, you are extraordinary, and the world needs your extraordinary